right, this is Daf Yomi in motion number 839. Today we're going to learn Daf Beis in Bava Basra, and we're going to be speaking about Hashutfin Shirotzu Lasos Mechitza. We wanted to make a mechitza in the common chutzner that they had. Chutzeros were usually in the front of the house. They wanted to separate. They agreed that they wanted to make a separation between them. It can either be that one of the persons wanted to start doing private things in his chutzner. He didn't want other people looking at him. So they agreed to make this separation. Or it could mean that they just wanted to delineate where was the middle point. And it depends, because most of the chutzneros are normal chutzner that you can split. There's a certain chutzner that you can split without asking the person if there's four amos. Distance between like 4 by 4, you can split without asking the person. But here, it seems like we're talking about it was less than the amount, so that's why they had to both want to split. Let's see. The Mishnah says, "Ashutfin shirotzu lasos mechitza." They wanted to make a division between them, the chutzner and the chutzner. And the chutzner they used to usually do a lot of tashmishin in it, and so therefore they want to split. Bainin es hakoisel, they can build with they agreeing, so they're going to have to build a wall in the middle, the emsa. So they agreed on a mechitza. Now that they agreed, they're going to have to build a wall in the emsa, in the middle. Emsa means right in the middle. Part of the wall, thickness of the wall, half of the thickness of the wall will be on one person's rishus, and the other half of the thickness of the wall will be on the other person's rishus. So makom shenoigu libnos gavil, where they used the different materials. Gavil was the thickest material, that was 3 tefachim wide. So it was 4 tefachim. It was two tefachim on each side with gavil. Rashi says, gavil was 3 tefachim on. Right. Was 6 tefachim, so it's 3 tefachim on each side, and the gazis was 5 tefachim, so each one would have to take from his side of the chutzner 2.5. That was gazis, and kfisin was dalet, a total of dalet, so each person would have to take 2 tefachim, and levanim was 3, so each person would have to take 1.5 tefachim of the thickness of the wall onto their half of the chutzner. So the Mishnah says, "Makom shenoigu libnos gavil." When they use the thickest wall, that's the makom. Then they're going to both have to pay that amount. They have no choice. Even if one of them would want to pay with a cheaper wall, he's going to have to pay. If that's the minhag, he's going to have to pay. Not only will he have to be mishtatif in the wall, but he'll also have to donate 3 tefachim of his chutzner to that wall. And gazis, if the minhag is to use the thinner wall of 5, so each person is going to have to pay for half of that wall, and also will take 2.5 tefachim into their chutzner. Into their chutzner. And gazis and kfisin is the is the olive. It's a total of 4 tefachim thick. So each one's going to have to take 2 tefachim into their rishus. And Visim Bilabanim. There's a total of 3, so each one's going to have to take 1.5 tefachim into their rishus. Bainin hakol kimin hagminim. And then everything is always according to what the normal is there. Whatever the normal is, that's what each person will have to split those costs and to absorb that amount into their chutzner. bigavil. In the case where they're building a wall of gavil, when the minhag is to build with gavil, bigavil zen noisen dalet tefachim. This one gimel tefachim. This one will have to take. Will give gimel tefachim worth of the wall. Zen noisen gimel tefachim. Begazis, when the minhag is to build with gazis, which is 5, a wall thick 5. So ze noisen tefachim umechsa. Ze noisen tefachim umechsa. Each one has to give half. B'kfisin ze noisen tefachim v'ze noisen tefachim. V'lebenim ze noisen tefach umechsa v'ze noisen tefach umechsa. I think the Gemara is going to speak about it. I mean, if you just told us that you just told us this one has to give 3 tefachim, the other one has to give 3 tefachim, this one has to give once you all right, right. Right, you might not know that. I mean, once you tell us what type of wall, so now they're just telling us that each one has to pay for half the wall, and each one has to give exactly half of the wall and give from their reshus exactly enough to hold half of the wall. That maybe was necessary, because otherwise, just by knowing the minhag of Medina, what type of wall, maybe we wouldn't know that they both have to absorb both half of the expense. Because you might think that if one wanted it more than the other, maybe that one has to have more of it onto his land. Maybe he has to pay for more than half. And then the Mishnah says, once we know that they both have to split it equally, so lefichach im nofal hakaisel amakom ba'avanim shel shnei. Therefore, once we see that walls always are built equally, meaning even if once both of them agree to build, even if one of them was the one who initiated it, they both have to build equally. And so therefore, once we see that, so then if any wall will fall down, then it'll always be that all the rocks and the space where the wall was will be considered the midpoint of the chutzner, and half of that space will belong to one of the shutafim, and the other half will belong to the other. And all of the rocks will also be divided amongst the two of them. We'll always know that that'll be the case. The Mishnah says so too, not only in a chutzner between houses, but in a gina where they're growing produce, they're growing vegetables, and the two want to split. The same din will apply. Once they agree to split, they'll have to build a wall, which is according to the minhag of the Medina. So makam shenoigu ligdor, if it's a place where they usually do split, so mechayivin ois, so if one wants to make the wall and the other one does not want to make the wall, so then he can force the other person. Rashi, where we are in the Gemara, up about 8 lines. V'chein begina, mechayivin es shnehem, libnois b'makam she'noigu ligdor be'emsa. Here, what he's saying is that anywhere that it's the makam to make, if it's a makam that they do make walls, just as like it's saying in the Gina, you can mechayev the other person to build with you and to absorb half of the expenses. I guess that applies also to the chutzner when it says rotzu, and mashma that they it's not necessarily rotzu. If one wanted it, and if it's a makam ligdor, so then they one can force the other one. I guess maybe rotzu is a place where one can't force the other one. If it's not a chutzner, she yochol that's made for chalukah, then I guess you would have to get the consent of both of them. You couldn't force. If it's not a chatzah sheyichol, which is oimed for chalukah, so then you would, I guess, maybe have to have the reshus. Maybe a stam gin is automatically the size which is roy for chalukah, and therefore, if it's a makom that they do make fences, put fences up, you can force the other person. Maybe the chutzner, you can't force them. They both have to want because it maybe was too small of a size. The Mishnah says, "Mechem begina." So makam shnagu ligdor mechayevin oiso whenever it's yesh bo chalukah. About the bika, but if it's out in the fields, Rashi says a bika is not like a gina. That's for like it's like a wheat field. It's like a stay levan, which is those big field. Now to divide those, if those two neighbors have those next to each other, and they want to divide between them, so makom shenoigu shelo ligdor ein mechayevin oiso, where they're not noig to put up a gather between them, you can't mechayev them. Which seems natural because we just said before, makam shenoigu ligdor, then you can mechayev. Mashma, Rashi says, the next Rashi about Babika, right? Still about makam shenoigu lo ligdor. Gemara before my come on, what are we talking about? Makam that they're knowing not to make a gather, so then you can't mechayev them. Of course not, because it's not the makam where they are knowing to put up a gather like this. Of course you can't mechayev him. And mechayev oiso. Ella, however, in a case like that, when it's makam that they do not, where there is not the minhag to put up fences, if they want to, however, they could. That's what the Mishnah says. Elohim rotza kainas l'toich shalom. So in a place where it's not the minhag to leave door to put up a fence, and one of them wants to, so he can't force the other one. So he can put up one, but he has to pay for it and put it all into his land. L'toich shalom. Let's put most of it into his land. He can leave a little bit over into the next person's land, but most of it has to be sitting on his land, and he has to pay for it. That's what Mishnah says. He can bring it completely in his land, and then build it. Right. So in a case like that, when he built the whole wall himself, now he wants to. Usually, we don't have to worry about knowing whose wall it was, because we just said that once there's, if it's a makom shenoigu live nice, or if they were agreed amongst each other. And if there's no like simanim on the wall, then we can assume that both of them built it. Therefore, it'll be sitting on both of their lands, and also it'll be both of their rocks. But if we'll ever see a simon, because one of them decided to build on his own, if we'll see a simon on the outside of the wall, that shows that that's the outside of the wall. That means that the person on the other side built the whole wall himself, and it's completely inside that person's chatzeh, his land. That's what it means. When a person decides to build the wall himself, he has put a chazis, a simon, a marker on the outside of the wall. If a wall will fall down and there'll be a chazis that can be noticeable that it was on the outside of the wall, then we'll know that exactly there was all his rocks and it was all his land. Then both the place and the rocks will be his. And if they agreed both to build, in a place where it's not a minhag to make a wall, but they did both want it. So then they do build it in the middle. Because it's a place where it's not the minhag to build walls, and they wanted it anyway, so therefore they have to put a chazis mekan. Rashi, last Rashi of the Mishnah, mekan umekan, lahodia sheshneihim asu, to inform us that both of them made it, because otherwise we wouldn't know, because it's not a place where people make walls. Because it has a chazis on both sides, if it fell down, we'd be able to see the simon. That's the Mishnah. Like the Gemara says, Savru, they thought, the Gemara is going to ask Shailas on the ratio of this Mishnah. They thought to think that to explain this Mishnah, shutfim shirotzu lasos mechitza. They wanted to make a mechitza. There's two ways of understanding a mechitza. Mechitza can be the physical blockade, the physical. They want to make a blockade. They want to make a wall, physical wall. Or mechitza, they want to make a division. They want to make a separation. Mechitza can mean separation, meaning they wanted to delineate whose side was whose, but they didn't really necessarily want to make a physical wall. It's two ways of understanding that. But they thought in the beginning, and they did think in the conclusion also, that it was a physical wall that they wanted. And that's the way the Gemara is going to come out in the Maskana also. So Vrua, my mechitza, what is a mechitza? A guda. Guda means a physical barricade, a physical blockage, not just like a technical division. Wait, there's nothing physically standing there, but a physical wall. So they thought mechitza means a physical wall. They wanted to build a wall together. Kiritani, like we learn in our Mishnah, a brisa that shows that mechitza is used as that in that term, so that it's physical wall. Kiritanya, mechitzas hakerem. They talk about the mechitzas of a vineyard. Shenifritza, that actually broke down. So we see they're actually talking about a physical wall. When the mechitzas, this is in Kalayim, when the mechitzas of the kerem, which were dividing the kerem from a wheat field, when it broke down in certain dinim, lagabi kalayim, whether the wheat, if the wheat would then, because it doesn't have this physical separation between the kerem, and if the vineyard, the vines would be right up against. See, before when there was a wall, a mechitza, then both sides, the Baal Tavua and the Baal Kerem, they're allowed to grow their produce right up to the fence. They don't have to worry that there'll be kalayim underneath the fence, and they're allowed because there's mechitza separating, even though it's only on top, even though maybe the roots would be mingle underneath. There's not a problem, and therefore there's no issue of kalayim. But if that wall breaks down, then if that wheat would grow 1/200th while it's mingled amongst the roots of the kerem, then it would be an issue of kalayim. It would become usher. It would usher the tavua. And Rashi speaks about it, that it's more on the Baal Kerem to be merachik himself from the tavua than it is from the Baal Tavua to be merachik himself from the kerem. It's more on the kerem's responsibility for different reasons. They unfortunately explain it. So, however, if the wall broke down, then they have to the different considerations, but about what has to be done. But we see that they were referring to mechitza as a physical wall. So the Gemara says, Omar Lo, the Baal Tavua can tell the Baal Kerem to fix his wall because it's a responsibility of the Baal Kerem to fix it. Right. So when there is no wall, they're supposed to be merachik. It says in the pasuk, you're supposed to be merachik. There's mishnayos that say that if there's no wall, then they have to be merachik from each other. The Baal Kerem has to be merachik from the state, the soda of Tavua, Abba Amos, for his plow to go in and to separate between the two crops. But if there's a wall, they can plant right up to the wall. So when it broke down, so the Baal Tavua told the Baal Kerem, because it was the responsibility of the Baal Kerem to be merachik himself, told him to put the wall back up. So Amar Lo, go do, make a fence, because that's the way. That was the minhag. That was the way they were growing from before. They grew their produce right up to the border. So therefore, there's supposed to be a wall there, and now it fell down. So now the Baal Kerem is the one has to put it back. I was going to speak about it later, why it's the Baal Kerem that always has to put the wall back. So, Chosra, and after he put it back, it broke down again. So he was getting, So Amar Goder Chazra Benifritza, and then he went pulled it back, and then it broke down again. Amar Lo. So the Baal Tzvua told him to put it back again. This would be the third time that he was putting it up. So he didn't put up the third time. Nisyayish Menu, like he gave up hope of doing it. And then they grew, the Tvua grew 1/200 together with the roots of the Kerem. And then there was Kidesh and also the Tvua. Although Gadra, the Baal Kerem, didn't put the fence up the third time, the Tvua grew 1/200 together with the Kerem. Harizeh Kidesh. And it was Oyster the Tvua. Chayev Bachrayus, and the Baal Kerem was Chayev for all the damage that occurred. So you see there that the machitza means a physical wall. So that's what that would be the maskana, but that's what the Gemara was thinking in the beginning, and that's what was being referred to. They agreed to make a physical wall here, but the problem was if they're talking about a physical wall, then that means that the only reason that we see that they have to build it is because they agreed to build it. But other than the fact that they agreed to make this physical wall separation between them, they wouldn't have had to do it. So that means that there's no hezek from one person to see the private doings of the other person. So that means hezek is lo shmei hezek, that this one person can see everything the other person is doing. That damage, that it inhibits the use of his chatzir, is not considered a real damage. That's what the Gemara says. So the time, whole time that we see that they're forced to build the walls on both of their sides. No, 51. The whole reason why we see that they're forced to build the mechitz on both of their sides, derotzu, because they had agreed to, they wanted to build it. Once they wanted to, then they had to build it with all the requirements that we mentioned in the Mishnah. Once they agreed, then it has to be done according to the minhag of the Medina. But if they had never wanted to with each other, they wouldn't have had to build it. The time of derotzu, halo rotzu, ein mechayev v'noisane. Also, if they hadn't wanted, we wouldn't have been mechayev anybody to build. What do we see from that? That the fact that one sees the others what they're doing, because the chutzah was usually in front of the houses, each one can see what each one's doing, and they would inhibit it with the way they can use their chutzah, but that's not called any damage. So Alma, Hezek Ria, love Shmei Hezek. From that we would see that the fact this diminished usage of the chutzah because the other person can see everything is watching him, it's not called a damage. One says, well, we could learn it, the Ema, we could learn it differently. Actually, we could learn the Mishnah that is not talking about a physical mechitza, that they wanted to build a physical mechitza with each other, but rather that all they wanted to do was to divide, theoretically, the chutzner in half between them, but not to put a physical structure in between them. And that's what they were agreeing to. The Ema, my mechitza, plukta, maybe the real hezber of what mechitza mean is just this theoretical dividing of the chutzner into each person's half. Plukta. Why would we say that? We learn we have a pasuk that says, mechzas ha'eda, half of the eda, meaning the half. Mechzas is sometimes referred to as like a division, half. Doesn't mean in that case, in this pasuk in Bamidbar, it says, v'tiyeh mechzas ha'eda min ha'tzoim shlosh me'os elef u'shloshim elef shiva alafim v'chamesh ma'os. That's a division. We didn't actually divide them with a wall, but we did divide them in half. Theoretically, how much would be shaykh to one half? So the lashon mechitza can be just the division, dividing it. And if that's true, So then what does it mean they wanted? Once they wanted to do that, just to divide it, then there was suddenly a requirement for a fence to be put up. All they didn't want a fence. So so therefore, what was happening was they decided to see whose part was shaykh to whose, and then suddenly there become a chiyuv for them to divide it physically also. If so, then why? Because that would tell us that once they know whose is whose, then it's always supposed to be divided, because calls mine that it's not, then one will be damaging the others. When they don't know whose is whose, so then I guess it's not shaykh to take care of the problem of one person looking into the chutz of the other, because you just don't know how to divide it. But once you know how it should be divided, suddenly immediately there's a chiyuv to divide it. Because then why would that be? Because it's damage that each one's doing to the other. And that would be the cause for the chiyuv. So McCaven Durotsu, so Bainin Esa Kaisel Bal Korcho. Then it has to be built against their will. Alma, that would teach us that Hezek. Ria, Shmei Hezek, that would teach us that just the actual person who can look into the other person's chutzner is causing him damage automatically, and that has to be taken care of, and that's why there would be chiyuv. So Mar said, that's fine. That would be learning that Hezek Ria is a Hezek. But the Gemara says, if that's the way we're supposed to learn, Ihachi, if that's what they just wanted to find out who owned how much of each chutzner, and then came the chiyuv to build a physical wall. But if they really wanted, the rotzu between them was only about dividing and seeing how much each person owes, then they shouldn't have said rotzu shnaim shirotzu. Shoot from Shirotzu Lasos Machitza should have said shoot from Shirotzu Lachzois, that wanted to delineate how much of the chutzner is a shaykh to each person. It should have said, not to use the lashon that was used. It should have said Shirotzu Lachzois miboile, and it didn't. So it's mashma more. The way the lashon was used was that it's a physical division that they were making. So then, what are we left with? It has to be that's what they wanted. They really came to the conclusion. They agreed to make a physical division between them. Elamai Guda. So we're not talking about a theoretical division of how much each person owes, but rather we must be talking about a physical. They came to an agreement about making a physical division between them. My Guda, Elamai Guda, a physical division. The Gemara says, well, if it's a physical division, and then it says, if they came to agreement to make a physical division, then they have to build a wall between them. Boinin esa koisel. They shouldn't have said boinin esa koisel. If they shoot from shvatzu lasos machitza, meaning machitza here means a physical wall, they should have said that boinin iso. They should go and build it. They should go and build it. Boinin iso mi boile, not boinin esa koisel. That means like we repeated the word kosel, because machitza we just said means a kosel. So why would the Mishnah then tell us, then they have to go and build a kosel? And therefore that's a problem to understand the word machitza means a physical wall. But the Gemara wants to say that it does mean a physical wall. And the reason it specified boinin as a kosel, if we had learned the way oiso, which would have made sense, would have been a problem. Havamin, I would have thought, what could they go and build? They agreed to build a physical separation. Now, what would they go and build? They'll go and build a flimsy the minimal type thickness wall, minimal type of wall. Mesifin, Pa'alma, Kamashman, Kaisel. Kamashman, they cannot build the minimal. They have to build according to the Minhag HaMedina. And then even though that one might have been maskim to make this separation with a physical separation, he might not have wanted to build a separation which entails a great expense, or that even entails taking up room from his chutzner, because these other walls, thickness, and they will go into take away his chutzner. Maybe he didn't want to diminish the space of his tashmish in his chutzner. He was only willing to take away the area that he couldn't stretch beyond the airspace that he used to be able to stretch beyond. Now he's limiting his airspace. So these two dots, they're not supposed to be here. It's a Taurus, Sofrim. So then the Gemara is still going into the lashon of the Tanakama. We said that they build a wall. The Emsa, they build a wall in the middle. They take away the Bechulu. They build a wall right in the middle. Gemara says, Pshita, obviously if they agreed, and the agreement means to build a wall, then obviously it's going to be in the middle. Gemara says, no, you have to tell us it had to be in the middle because maybe when they agreed, one wasn't willing to build it in the middle. One thought, I'll take, like we just said, I'm willing to diminish, to limit and put a blockage on how far my chutzner goes, but I don't want to eat into my chutzner and reduce the room that he has to of his chutzner actually, that he can do things in. No, we needed to know that it has to be in the middle because maybe what we're talking about is not that they both they both came to a very mutual agreement to build a wall. No, maybe one came with the idea, really wanted the mechitza because he wanted to begin doing private activities in his chutzner, and therefore he saw the need, and he therefore convinced the other to agree with him. So the other one agreed that he'll cooperate and build a wall with him. So you might have thought, in a case like that, you might think, Matzi Omerle, that the one who was convinced could tell him that he was only willing to build this wall. Isrotze loch ba'avira b'tashmishto lo isrotze loch. Kamash Malan. You might have thought that he could sell him. I was willing to make that the wall, which would limit how far my chutzner goes, but not to eat into my chutzner, only to limit. It's called the avira, to take away some of his airspace. Maybe he's taking away some of his airspace, but he didn't want it to take away any of his space on the ground. Mashma that once he agrees, even if he was convinced by the other person, then he has to split, according to the Minhag Medina, exactly even down the middle, and even with a wall, which is the Minhag Medina. So when we said before that, we might have thought that the person, why do we need the word build a co-cell? Because instead of saying so, if they are agreeing about building a physical wall, so then, because one wanted privacy, so you might have thought, right, it has to be one like the Medina. Even though the Kfisin, he really just he was willing to make a wall that would give the other person privacy, but it was the maskana of the Mishnah was that it has to be according to the Minhag Medina. When you're going to build walls, it has to be the wall that is noiheg in that place to take care of hezek. That one person shouldn't be able to see the other. But in terms of whether hezek is shmei hezek or not, it doesn't seem like we really answered the question because it was. Because there was It doesn't seem like we 100% addressed that question, whether it is Hezek Riyah, Shmei Hezek or not. But the Gemara says, well, we did suggest two studying to whether Hezek Riyah was Shmei Hezek or not. The Gemara says, Hezek Riyah, Ulav Shmei Hezek. You're going to entertain the possibility that Hezek Riyah is not called a Hezek. The Gemara is bothered by that because we have places in Shas that says Hezek Riyah is Shmei Hezek. We have simonim for like 6 places in Shas that the Gemara is going to talk about now. Siman Gina. Kaisel, maybe this was an example. The other case was Kaifin, B'cholkin, Chaloinos, B'Rav Nachman. Tashma, we learned in the Brisa, we learned in our Mishnah B'chein Begina. We said that they agree to make a machitzi in the case of our Mishnah, and then they have to build these walls. So too, if they agree in a gina where their vegetables are growing, they have to also build according to the Minhag of Medina. So the Gemara says, Rashi on the Mishnah says in now just 2 lines down from the beginning of the Gemara, Chen Begina, Mechayevin es Shnehen, we Mechayev them both. Libnos to build, B'makam Shenayigu Ligdor Be'ems, in the place where they usually put up fences between gardens, then we Mechayev them to put it up. So that implies there that Hezek Riyah is the problem. We don't want one to be able to look at the other. Gemara says that, so there we see an example that Hezek Riyah is Shmei Hezek. How can we have the possibility to think over here that Hezek Riyah is not Shmei Hezek? Gemara says that's a case of a Gina. A Gina is different than a Chatzer. Because a Gina, even if there's a Machlokus, whether Hezek Riyah is Shmei Hezek or not, everybody would agree when it comes to a Gina that would be Hezek Riyah because the produce is in the Gina all year round. Gina Shani. The Gemara says Gina is different. You wouldn't be able to learn that Hezek Riyah is Shmei Hezek because it could be everybody agrees that it's Shmei Hezek because Gina is Shani. How do we know Gina is Shani? Kida Rav Abba to Amar Rav Abba, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Osel Adam La'amoy B'Soda Chaveiro B'Shas Shehi Omedes B'Komase. It's also to stand. Rabbi Abba said it's also to stand by somebody's field when it's full of good produce.